Why did the sea feel wrong that morning? Commander Sarah Mitchell couldn't name it at first. The Pacific stretched out in calm silence, the destroyer's engines humming steady beneath her boots, her coffee still warm in her hand. It should have been ordinary, just another patrol, just another sunrise over an endless horizon. But something pressed at her chest, a weight she couldn't shake, instinct. Years of service had taught her to listen when the quiet felt too quiet. Her radar operator's voice broke the stillness. Contact, bearing 270, range 12 nautical miles, moving fast. Mitchell set her coffee aside and crossed the bridge, eyes narrowing at the green blip streaking across the screen. It wasn't the speed of a fishing boat. It wasn't the lumbering pace of a cargo ship. 40 knots, pushing faster. Her gut tightened. That wasn't traffic. That was intent. Course. She asked quietly. 90 degrees, straight toward the restricted zone. Of course. The one place they weren't supposed to be tested. The exercise area. Classified. Dangerous. And yet, here it was a yacht. Of all things charging headlong. Where no yacht belonged. Communications. Hail them. Seaman Collins adjusted his headset, his tone sharp, official. Unknown vessel. Bearing 270 from USS Vigilant. This is United States Navy warship. Identify yourself and state intentions. You are approaching restricted waters. The bridge fell into silence again, all eyes flicking between their captain and the radar screen. Seconds bled into half a minute. No response. The contact didn't slow. Didn't turn, if anything. It accelerated. Mitchell's jaw set. Her instincts whispered. Not civilian, not benign. Sound general quarters. The alarm split the destroyer's hull. A wailing cry that echoed through every corridor. The deck vibrated as sailors sprinted to their stations, their faces hard, their motions drilled into muscle memory. The calm patrol was over within minutes. Her destroyer transformed, guns readied, Marines armed, every heartbeat of the crew sinking to hers, waiting on her next word. She felt the familiar weight settle over her chest, the burden of command. To carry the lives of 200 sailors in her hands, every decision a knife edge. Sonar? Chief Williams' voice came back steady but tight. Single screw, high-speed engine, acoustic signature suggests. A yacht large, but captain. I'm also picking up mechanical operations, hatches opening, something moving below the waterline. Mitchell's stomach turned cold. Smugglers? Saboteurs? Drug runners used yachts, yes, but what smugglers charged into restricted waters while ignoring Navy hails? No, this was something else. Communications, warn them again. Immediate course change. Or we will interdict. Collins' voice rang out clear, firm, commanding. No response, only the blip, racing closer. Mitchell's pulse thudded in her ears. She had the authority to stop it, and she would. Weapons, she said softly. Load forward 5-inch. Practice rounds. 2 warning shots across their bow. Aye, Captain. Forward 5-inch loaded. Fire. The ship trembled as the gun thundered, the recoil echoing across the deck. Shells screamed into the distance, exploding water into towering geysers. Just ahead of the yacht's path, impossible to ignore, a warning etched in steel. For a breath, it seemed to work. The yacht slowed, its bow shifted slightly. Mitchell's shoulders eased. Then Williams' voice cut the moment in half. Captain. New sounds, underwater compartments opening, and engines. Still at full power, despite the speed drop. Mitchell snapped her binoculars to her eyes, locking on the white speck in the distance. Sleek, expensive, out of place. She watched its crew moving fast across deck, nervous hands, nervous glances. And beneath the surface, Williams' sonar painted a different story. A lie wrapped in white paint and polished fittings. Contact stopped engines, Rodriguez reported. They're transmitting distress, claiming engine failure, requesting medical assistance. Mitchell lowered the binoculars, her jaw clenched. Sonar? Engines still running. Williams confirmed grimly. Active machinery below the waterline. Pumps, hydraulics. They're lying. Of course they were. Mitchell knew this game. Pirates, smugglers, covert operators. They all dressed their traps in the same disguise. Desperation. Distress signals, cries for help, lure the Navy close, exploit their duty to protect, and then strike. But what if this time it wasn't a trap? What if someone truly was hurt aboard that yacht? What if she stood here, mistrusting, and condemned someone to die for her suspicion? The weight pressed heavier on her chest, the old conflict that never went away, to act on instinct. Or to doubt herself. She hated that part of command. The loneliness of it. No right answers, only consequences. Prepare boarding party, she ordered finally, her voice flat. Marines only, full tactical gear. Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Her XO leaned close. Captain, recommend maintaining safe distance until confirmed. Mitchell shook her head. Negative, if they're in distress. We respond, but we go ready. Orders snapped across the deck. Rigid inflatables lowered into the sea. Marines in black gear, rifles slung, boarded with speed and discipline. Mitchell tracked them through her binoculars as they surged across. The waves toward the yacht, spray rising behind their bows. Vigilant boarding party approaching. Sergeant Martinez's voice crackled over comms. Visual on crew 4 individuals. Hands visible, no weapons. Mitchell exhaled. A fragile thread of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. Maybe this really was just a yacht in the wrong place. Bad luck tangled with Navy patrol routes, but hope never silenced instinct. Not for long. Be advised. She transmitted. Sonar still reading active machinery. Approach with caution. Acknowledged. Through her binoculars, she watched the Marines climb aboard. Weapons angled but not aimed. The crew greeted them with forced smiles. Nervous eyes darting to the cabin. Always to the cabin. As if waiting, Martinez's voice returned. Quieter. Measured. Vigilant. The yacht has serious modifications. Communications equipment. Military grade. Way beyond civilian. Crew papers look fake. Too clean. And Captain. They keep looking toward the cabin, like they're waiting for orders. A sharp current of dread coursed through her. This wasn't random. This wasn't accident. Before she could respond, Williams' voice rose from sonar. Captain. New contacts in the water. Multiple, fast, mechanical. Small subs or drones. Mitchell froze. The patterns snapped together. High-speed approach. Fake distress. Hidden machinery. Now submersibles. This yacht wasn't lost at sea. It was a delivery platform, deploying something into restricted waters. Something they weren't supposed to see. Martinez. Get your team off that yacht now. But before the words could reach him, the deck of the yacht came alive. Panels swung open, figures emerged, armed, trained, moving with precision. Not civilians, not even close. Vigilant. Martinez's voice was steady, but Mitchell heard. The tight edge beneath it. Multiple armed contacts on deck. They're not pointing weapons yet, but we are in a standoff. Mitchell's throat tightened. Marines outnumbered. Trapped. Any order to fire could turn it into a massacre. Any hesitation could cost them everything. Then a new voice broke across the radio. Calm. Educated. Almost arrogant. This is the captain of the yacht. I am claiming diplomatic immunity under international law. Your boarding of this vessel is illegal. Withdraw your personnel immediately. Diplomatic immunity? Mitchell gripped the handset. Identify yourself, provide credentials. I am not required to provide identification to a military vessel acting illegally. Remove your people or I contact my embassy. His voice was steady, but she heard. It tension, fear. He wasn't as certain as he pretended. But even so, diplomats didn't travel in unmarked yachts. Diplomats didn't deploy drones underwater. Diplomats didn't carry rifles in silence. Williams' sonar cut back in, sharp, urgent. Underwater contacts moving away at high speed. Mission complete. Mitchell's pulse spiked. It all made sense. The rush into restricted waters, the deception, the stall. They'd used our destroyer as cover to slip something beneath the sea, complete their operation, and escape behind the shield of immunity. But what operation? What did they deploy under the waves? Before she could demand answers, Martinez's voice returned softer this time, strained. "Captain, I think I just saw someone in the cabin. Someone who shouldn't be here. Someone who's supposed to be dead." Mitchell froze. "Repeat." "Female. Military bearing, silver hair, scar on her face. Sir, I think it's a U.S. officer." His voice dropped, disbelief woven into every word. "And she's wearing Admiral's insignia." Mitchell's grip faltered, the room tilted. Her lungs seized as if the sea had rushed into her chest. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The scar, the uniform, the face, it couldn't be, but it was because only one woman matched that description, and she had been dead for 3 years. What do you do when the dead walk back into your life? Commander Sarah Mitchell stared at the radio as if it had turned to ice in her hands. Sergeant Martinez's voice crackled through the channel, words heavy with disbelief. "Captain, she's coming out on deck, silver hair, scar from temple to jawline. She's wearing navy dress blues with Admiral stars." Mitchell's blood ran cold. The scar, the uniform, the impossible truth staring her in the face. Only one woman could match that description. Admiral Rebecca Torres. Mentor, teacher, friend, the officer who had shaped her into who she was. The woman buried 3 years ago after her helicopter had gone down in the South China Sea. A coffin lowered into Arlington while taps played. A coffin that had been empty. "Describe her again," Mitchell whispered, her voice breaking. 5'6". Caucasian, silver hair, moving with authority. She's walking toward us with hands raised. A pause. Static crackling. "Captain." "She's saying something," says. "Tell Commander Mitchell that Athena sends her regards." The nickname struck like a blade to the heart. Athena. No one used that word except Rebecca. Not in years. It was Mitchell's call sign at the academy, given during a storm simulation where she alone had found the stars to guide her class to safety. Only Rebecca had ever spoken it since. The handset slipped from Mitchell's fingers, clattering against the deck. Her hands trembled, her chest tightened. The bridge crew stared, confused by her reaction, but none dared to speak, because how could she explain? How could she tell them that the woman who had shaped her entire career, the one she had mourned, was standing alive on that yacht? Hayes' voice was low, urgent. "Captain, if that's Admiral Torres." This just got infinitely more complicated. Mitchell forced herself to breathe, picked the radio back up with fingers that didn't feel like her own. "Martinez, ask her a question. Something no one else could know. Ask her what she told me the night before my first command." Static hummed. Then Martinez returned, his voice hushed with awe. "Captain," she says, "I told you that command isn't about having all the answers. It's about making the right decisions when you don't have enough information and living with the consequences." Mitchell's throat constricted, those exact words spoken 7 years ago, words never recorded, words never repeated, words only Rebecca Torres could know. But Rebecca Torres was dead, wasn't she? "Captain," Williams called from sonar, shattering her trance. "New contact. Southeast. Large vessel. Closing at 30 knots. Military configuration." Mitchell spun toward the display. A destroyer, bigger than hers, closing fast. Range 15 nautical miles. Bearing direct. Identification? Williams' face was pale. "Acoustic signature matches. One of ours, USS Constellation." Mitchell's stomach dropped. The Constellation wasn't supposed to be here. It was scheduled for exercises 300 miles north. No word from command about a redeployment. The timing was too perfect. Too fast. Too suspicious. Communications. Hail Fleet. Any confirmation? Collins shook his head. Negative. We're still listed as the only U.S. vessel in this sector. Hayes stepped closer, whispering, Captain, if Torres is alive, and if that ship wasn't scheduled, we may be walking straight into something we can't see. Mitchell didn't respond. Her eyes locked on the blip rushing across the radar, another predator in the water, and she didn't know whose side it was on. Martinez's voice returned over the comm. Captain, the woman is requesting direct communication with you. Says it's urgent, says lives depend on it. Mitchell hesitated, her heart pounding. The bridge crew watched her in silence. She closed her eyes, and then, Commander Mitchell. The voice that crackled through was older, rasped by years, but unmistakable. The Texas lilt, the clipped. Authority. Rebecca Torres. Mitchell's breath caught. Rebecca. The word was a whisper ripped from somewhere deep. Hello, Sarah. The voice was calm, deliberate. I know this is a shock, but I need you to listen carefully. My death was staged. I've been under deep cover for 3 years. The operation is compromised now, and your boarding party has stumbled into something larger than either of us. Mitchell shook her head violently, as if she could dislodge the words. That's impossible. I saw the crash reports. The memorial, all fabricated, by people high in our own command. Sarah, there are hostile forces within the structure itself. I've been gathering evidence to expose them. If you follow protocol now, if you report this encounter up the chain, everything I've worked for dies, and so do you. The bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics. Mitchell's crew looked to her, waiting, their faces tight with fear. She wanted to believe. God, she wanted to believe, but if Torres was lying, if this was some elaborate deception, she'd risk her crew, her ship, her country, range to Constellation? She forced out. 10 nautical miles, Rodriguez said. Closing fast, flank speed. Mitchell clenched her fists. Time was collapsing. Choices were narrowing. Sarah. Torres' voice sharpened. Urgent now. That ship isn't here to help. It's here to erase witnesses. They've tracked me, and now you. They will kill us all to keep this buried. Mitchell stared at the screen, the green blip growing larger in her gut. She knew Torres was right. The timing, the silence from command, the sudden orders. It all smelled of orchestration. Captain, Hayes' voice cut in, low and steady. We need to report. Protocol. Mitchell snapped her gaze toward him, fire in her eyes. Protocol might get Use all killed, if she's right. Command is compromised. As if on cue, Collins spoke, his voice breaking. Priority flash message incoming. Authentication confirmed from Fleet Command. The bridge went still as Hayes decoded, his face draining of color. He looked up, his eyes hollow. Captain, orders are to sink the yacht immediately. No survivors, no investigation. A silence heavier than steel fell over the room. Mitchell reached for the slip of paper Hayes handed her. Read the words, cold, precise, final. Eliminate all witnesses. Her hands trembled, the codes checked out. The routing was correct. By every measure, these were real orders. Orders to murder. William's voice cut across the quiet, urgent, sharp. Captain. Constellation opening torpedo tubes, preparing to fire. The floor tilted under Mitchell's boots. She saw it all with sudden clarity. The Constellation wasn't confused. It wasn't mistaken. It had come to finish this. To erase Torres. To erase her. To erase her crew. Battle stations. Mitchell barked. All hands, prepare for hostile contact. The alarm shrieked again, the destroyer vibrating as men and women raced to stations. Yet through it all, Mitchell stood still for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Her crew trusted her. They believed in her. They would fight if she told them to. And if she chose wrong, they would die for it. Tara's voice broke the silence on comms. Sarah, listen to me. 3 years ago, I discovered that senior officers, admirals, Captains were selling submarine patrol routes, convoy schedules, weapons manifests, to foreign intelligence. They staged my death to stop me. The constellation is theirs. Mitchell's breath caught. Patrol routes, submarine schedules, the most classified secrets the Navy held. The kind of intelligence that, if sold, condemned hundreds of sailors to death. How many? She asked quietly. At least a dozen officers, for 5 years. And they've already cost us lives. 2 submarines sunk. Reported as accidents. They were betrayed. Mitchell's stomach twisted. She remembered those losses. The Hartford, the Virginia, both with all hands, friends among them, mourned, buried, and now murdered. "Captain," Williams said, his voice breaking, "Constellation is fired. 2 torpedoes inbound. Time shattered into fragments, decisions into blades." Mitchell gripped the radio with both hands. "Admiral Torres, do you have proof?" "Yes, aboard this yacht. Financial records, communications, intercepts. Everything you need to expose them. But if it's destroyed, if I'm destroyed, they win." The seconds bled away, torpedoes closing, death rushing across the water. Mitchell had no time left. She could obey her orders, sink the yacht, erase Torres, and pray the torpedoes were a bluff. Or she could defy the chain of command, trust a ghost, and risk everything on faith. She thought of her academy days, of Taurus. Words the night before her first command, making the right decision when you don't have enough information. And living with it, she straightened, her voice steady. "Helm, emergency turn starboard. Flank speed, evasive maneuvers." The Vigilant heeled hard, the torpedoes streaking past. Wakes slicing white across the waves. "Missed," Williams reported. Breathless, reloading, Mitchell turned back to her crew. Their eyes locked on her, waiting. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Weapons, prepare to return fire." Hayes' voice cracked, disbelieving. "Captain, you're ordering." "Used to fire on a U.S. ship." Mitchell's jaw hardened. "I'm ordering us to defend ourselves from traitors wearing our uniform." As her destroyer thundered into its evasive turn, the sea around them boiling with deception and betrayal, Sarah Mitchell realized command was never about the orders you followed. It was about the ones you defied. How do you fight an enemy wearing your own uniform? Sarah Mitchell gripped the edge of the command console as her destroyer screamed through evasive turns. The Constellation loomed closer on radar, torpedo tubes hot, weapons primed, American steel. American sailors, yet hunting her as if she were the enemy. "Sir, they're reloading." Williams called from sonar. "Second salvo in the water any second now." Mitchell steadied her voice, though her chest ached from the weight pressing down. "Helm, hold course. Stay unpredictable. Weapons target Constellation. Do not fire until I give the order." Her crew froze. She saw it in their eyes. The disbelief, the terror. Firing on another U.S. ship was unthinkable. An act that lived beyond dishonor. An act that could define them as traitors in history books. Hayes' voice cut through the tension, sharp, almost pleading. "Captain, stop. We cannot engage an American destroyer. We have procedures. For this, protocols. We should stand down and signal surrender. Let them board us." Mitchell's eyes locked on him. The man had been her right hand, her steady balance, and now his voice shook with something she couldn't read. Fear, or something deeper. "Lieutenant Commander," she said quietly, her tone edged with steel. "If we surrender, we all die. You saw the orders. No survivors." Hayes swallowed, but didn't look away. "And if we fight, we become what they accuse us of." Mitchell's hands curled into fists. That was the cruel trap, wasn't it? Whether she fought or surrendered, the story would be written without her. A report would declare them traitors, sunk at sea. Dead men couldn't protest. "Captain," Collins interrupted, headset pressed to his ear. "Intercepted transmission. It's from the Constellation's bridge. Captain Bradley himself. He's demanding we surrender immediately." Claims were harboring enemy agents and stolen intelligence. The blood drained from Mitchell's face. Bradley, a decorated officer, known for precision and integrity. A man she had once admired. If he was part of this, then the rot reached deeper than she dared imagine. "Put him through," Mitchell ordered. Bradley's voice crackled over the radio, crisp, authoritative. "Commander Mitchell, this is Captain James Bradley aboard Constellation. You are in possession of classified material and enemy operatives. Surrender at once or face destruction." Mitchell's throat tightened. She forced her words through clenched teeth. "Constellation, this is Vigilant. You fired torpedoes at a U.S. Navy ship. Explain your hostile action immediately." A pause. Then Bradley's voice returned, colder now. "You've been deceived, Commander. The woman claiming to be Admiral Torres is an imposter. She has used stolen identity information to infiltrate your ship. Stand down, surrender her, and this ends." Without bloodshed, Hayes turned, eyes pleading again. "Captain, listen to him. This could all be manipulation. We don't know Torres is who she says she is. What if we're the ones being used?" The doubt cut through her chest like a blade, because he was right about one thing she didn't know. She only had her instincts, and instincts were a frail shield against betrayal. Mitchell's lips parted, but before she could speak, another voice boomed across the bridge speakers, sharp and seething. "Commander Mitchell, this is Admiral Ricks aboard Constellation." The name struck like a thunderclap. Ricks, the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations. He was supposed to be in Washington. He was supposed to be testifying at budget hearings, but here he was, commanding the very ship hunting her. Mitchell's knuckles went wide around the radio. "Admiral Ricks, I was not informed of your presence in this sector." Ricks's voice rose, controlled rage simmering beneath. "You are out of line, Commander. You have stumbled into a classified operation beyond your clearance. That woman is a hostile asset. Your defiance threatens national security. I am ordering you stand down, surrender the yacht, and prepare to be boarded." Something inside Mitchell broke then, because Ricks wasn't named in passing within Torres' warnings. He was central, one of the very names linked to financial transfers, one of the very names Torres had accused of treason if he was here. It was proof, not rumor, not paranoia. Proof. Before she could respond, movement caught her eye. Pace. He was edging toward the internal comms panel, his hand hovering over the controls. Mitchell's gut clenched. "Lieutenant Commander," she said slowly, "step away from that console." Hayes turned, and she saw it in his eyes then. Cold, calculated, pity, not fear. "I'm sorry, Captain," he said softly. "You're a good officer, but you've seen too much. You're making the wrong choice." His hand moved. His pistol cleared its holster. In a flash, Mitchell's body reacted on instinct, hand falling toward her own sidearm. But Hayes was faster. He leveled his weapon at her, calm, precise, eyes steady. "Admiral Ricks," Hayes said into the radio, his voice steady. "This is Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Captain Mitchell has been relieved of duty due to mental instability. We are prepared to surrender the yacht and all materials, awaiting boarding instructions." The bridge exploded in chaos. Rodriguez leapt from his radar console, but froze when Hayes swung the pistol toward him. Collins' mouth opened, but he froze too, paralyzed by the sight of betrayal. Mitchell's chest constricted. Her second in command, her shadow, the man she trusted with her ship, and he was pointing a weapon at her heart. "How long?" she asked, her voice low, broken. Hayes blinked. 3 years. The words twisted inside her. He had been theirs from the start, watching her, reporting on her, his loyalty never hers, but to the conspiracy, the Hartford, the Virginia. She whispered, her throat dry. "You helped them. You gave their positions." Hayes' face twitched. For a moment, guilt flickered. Then it hardened. Necessary sacrifices to prevent a war that would have killed millions. You murdered them, Rodriguez spat, his voice shaking with fury. I saved more than I killed. Hayes snapped. You don't understand the scale. Sometimes the greater good demands difficult choices. Mitchell stared at him, and the hollow truth hit her. He believed it. He truly believed treason was patriotism, that betrayal was service. They hadn't just bought his silence. They had twisted his soul. Her voice came out a whisper. You betrayed us. Hayes' gaze softened for the first time. I betrayed no one. I've served the real mission. You just don't see it. As he spoke, Williams caught her eye from sonar. His hands moved silently, frantically. 3 fingers tapped against his screen. Then he pointed upward. Mitchell's heart kicked. 3 new contacts, submarines, American subs, running silent, moving into position around them both. Help. She masked her face. Forcing calm, she needed to stall. Needed to keep Hayes distracted long enough for the cavalry to surface. You know what, Hayes? She said slowly, raising her hands slightly in mock surrender. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've been blind. Maybe this is bigger than me. Hayes' pistol lowered just a fraction, his shoulders. East, Captain. I don't want to kill you. I never wanted this to happen. If you stand down now, we can all walk away alive. Rodriguez's jaw clenched. Colin's fist tightened at his console. They were waiting for her, watching her, hoping for her. Mitchell nodded slightly. Then let's wait for the boarding party. But the sea chose that moment to erupt. 3 leviathans rose from the depths, black steel cutting through white water as Los Angeles-class submarines broke the surface in unison. Spray cascaded. Their hulls gleamed like shadows made flesh. A voice thundered over open comms. Familiar, powerful. This is Admiral Rebecca Torres, aboard USS Seawolf. All vessels, stand down immediately. Captain Bradley, Admiral Ricks, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of American servicemen. The bridge of the Vigilant froze. Hayes' gun wavered, shock breaking across his face. Torres, alive, not on the yacht. On the Seawolf, coordinating, commanding. The yacht had been bait. The woman aboard a decoy. The conspiracy had walked straight into her trap. Ricks's voice burst across the radio, no longer steady but wild. Panicked. Impossible. Torres is dead. I saw the reports myself. Torres' reply was ice. Reports you helped fabricate. For 3 years, I've gathered evidence of your betrayal. Every transfer, every meeting, every death. We have it all. Mitchell's eyes found Hayes. His weapon trembled in his hand, his certainty cracking. They told me, he whispered. They told me we were preventing a war. Mitchell's voice cut him like glass. No, Hayes, you were helping start one. Outside, the subs closed in. Constellation's weapons went cold. The trap was sprung, and Sarah Mitchell stood on her bridge, her crew staring at her in shock and awe as the world shifted around them. What happens when the truth finally breaks the surface? The bridge of the Vigilant was silent except for the hum of machinery and the ragged breaths of sailors who had just seen the impossible. 3 submarines rose around them like black giants, the sea cascading off their hulls. Their presence was a wall of steel and finality, hemming in the Constellation, hemming in the yacht, hemming in every lie that had just been told. Admiral Torres' voice thundered over the comms again, steady, commanding, and real in a way that cut through every shadow. All vessels will stand down, weapons cold. Captain Bradley, Admiral Ricks, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of American servicemen. Mitchell's heart pounded. She gripped the console, trying to steady herself as reality tilted around her. Her mentor, her ghost, was alive. A voice now undeniable. Hayes still had his pistol out, but his hand shook. The calculation in his eyes was gone. What remained was confusion, guilt, and a hollow breaking of a man who realized the story he believed in had been written in lies. They told me we were preventing a war, he whispered again, his voice cracking. His pistol sagged, no longer aimed, hanging between regret and surrender. They swore to me, Captain. They swore this was for peace. Mitchell's voice was low, almost gentle, though it burned in her throat. They lied to you. They lied to all of us. Hayes looked at her, then not as an enemy, not even as a subordinate, but as a man stripped of certainty. For the first time, she saw fear in him, not fear of death, fear of having believed the wrong truth. Admiral Ricks, Torres continued overcomes, her words sharp enough to cut steel. For 3 years, you've hidden behind ranks and false orders. I have your bank records, your intercepted calls. I have your meetings with foreign intelligence. This is over. On the tactical display, the Constellation's weapons systems powered down. They had no choice. The subs had firing solutions locked, and every sailor aboard knew it. Then came Ricks's voice, shattering with fury. This is mutiny. This is treason. No, Torres said softly, with a finality that felt like judgment itself. This is justice. Mitchell looked at Hayes. His pistol finally slipped from his hand, clattering to the deck. The sound echoed like the closing of a coffin. He whispered, almost to himself, I thought I was saving my country. Mitchell's chest ached as she looked at him, her exo, her trusted shadow, her betrayer. She wanted to hate him, but all she saw was a man broken by the weight of choices made in darkness. You served something that wore the mask of patriotism, she said quietly. But the real thing doesn't hide in shadows. Rodriguez moved, stepping forward to disarm Hayes. But Mitchell raised a hand. Hayes didn't resist. He just stared at the deck, eyes hollow, the gun already far from his will outside boarding parties. Surged from the submarines, armed sailors stormed the yacht, stormed the Constellation. The radio carried fragments, shouts, commands, the sound of doors forced open. Traitors dragged into daylight. Mitchell's crew listened in silence, their faces tight with shock. They were fighting not foreign navies, not pirates, not smugglers, but their own. And that realization weighed heavier than any torpedo. Collins swallowed hard at the comms panel. Captain, Seawolf reports they have Ricks in custody. Captain Bradley, too. He hesitated, his voice softer. The yacht's been cleared. The decoy is secure. Torres confirms she's aboard Seawolf in command. Mitchell nodded slowly, the truth settling over her like ash after a fire. Torres was alive. The conspiracy was real, and the cancer inside their command was finally being cut out. But the relief wasn't clean. It was stained. Because betrayal didn't vanish with an arrest. It stayed lodged in the soul, whispering doubts about who could ever be trusted again. Mitchell exhaled, her voice low. All hands, stand down, secure weapons. Her crew obeyed with quiet efficiency. But the silence spoke louder than orders. They were sailors who had just seen their world turned upside down. Patriots who now knew the uniform could lie. Hayes sat slumped in a chair, wrists bound now, eyes empty. He didn't fight. Didn't beg. Didn't curse. He only repeated the same words like a prayer. Broken and hollow. I thought I was saving my country. Mitchell turned away, her chest heavy. She didn't know whether to despise him or pity him. Perhaps both. The hours that followed blurred. The subs escorted them back towards safety. The conspiracy unraveling in real time. Torres operatives transmitted files, bank accounts, coded intercepts, photographs of meetings where men in Navy whites shook hands with foreign agents. Every detail confirmed, every suspicion made flesh. 280 sailors lost aboard Hartford and Virginia, no longer accidents, but murders. Families who had grieved for mechanical failures would now grieve for betrayal. Mitchell's heart broke anew as she thought of them. And yet, somewhere in the grief was a spark of grim pride. Because now, at least, the truth had surfaced. Night fell before she heard Torres' voice again. This time not booming across comms, but calm, direct, on a secure line. Sarah. Mitchell froze at the sound of it. She hadn't heard her name in that voice for years. Not in training, Not in command briefings, but in memory, in friendship. Rebecca, she whispered, her throat tight. The Admiral's tone was softer now. Human. I'm sorry you were dragged into this. I never wanted you, or your crew, to be part of it. Mitchell's fists clenched. Dragged in? My ship was ordered to sink civilians. My XO was feeding them intel for years. My crew nearly died, thinking they were fighting Americans. Don't tell me I was dragged in. We were already drowning in it. Silence. Then Torres' voice, steadier. You're right, and you carried it better than most could. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. Mitchell shook her head, staring out at the dark sea. I almost did. I almost believed Hayes. I almost doubted myself. A pause. Then Torres' voice softened. Carrying weight Mitchell remembered from another lifetime. Command isn't about certainty, Sarah. It's about carrying the doubt and choosing anyway. That's the burden. That's why it's lonely. Mitchell's eyes burned, though she blinked back the heat. Because she knew it was true. She had known it all along. But hearing it again, from the one who taught her, hit like a blade pulled from an old wound. Rebecca, she said finally, voice low, almost breaking. I buried you. I know. Torres' reply was quiet. I watched. I heard the speeches. I saw the coffin. And I hated every second. But the lie bought me time. Time to find the truth. Time to bring them down. Mitchell's chest rose and fell. A storm raging inside her. Grief and relief, betrayal and pride. 1,000 contradictions in one. Then why me? She asked. Why bring this to my deck? Why not keep me in the dark, like the others? Because silence hung for a long moment before Torres answered. Because I knew you would make the choice I couldn't predict. The choice that wasn't written in any manual, and you did. Mitchell closed her eyes, letting the weight of that settle. It was no compliment. It was a reminder. That command wasn't about glory. It was about consequence. She exhaled, soft. Then what now? Now? Torres' voice carried both exhaustion and resolve. Now comes the hardest part. The arrests are just the surface. The roots of this run deeper. And there will be others, always others. Mitchell felt the truth of it sink into her bones. Conspiracies didn't die with men. They hid. They waited. The conversation ended with formalities, but Mitchell didn't move for a long time. She stood on her bridge in silence, her crew busy but subdued around her, the ocean endless in the dark. She had trusted a ghost. She had defied her orders, and somehow it had been the right choice. The right choices didn't feel clean. They felt heavy. In the end, it wasn't triumph she felt. It was weariness, and the knowledge that nothing about the uniform would ever look the same again. Because sometimes the enemy didn't come from across the sea. Sometimes the enemy looked like you, and that truth was harder than war. Why does recognition feel heavier than silence? 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood in the rose garden beneath the summer sun, the White House gleaming behind her like a stage set. Rows of pressed uniforms filled the chairs, their ribbons gleaming. Cameras clicked. The air smelled of roses and damp earth, but to Mitchell, it all felt sterile. The President of the United States pinned the Navy Cross on her chest. His words carried pride, rehearsed yet sincere, for extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy. Action. The citation read. Applause followed. A wave of sound that washed over her like surf she could not feel. She nodded, smiled where she was supposed to, shook hands when it was required. Yet all she could see in her mind's eye were 2 submarines sinking silently into black water. 280 sailors who would never receive medals. Their coffins had been filled with folded flags instead of bodies, and no amount of applause could erase the truth that their deaths had been orchestrated by men wearing the same uniform she wore now. As the ceremony ended, aides ushered her aside. Words of congratulation swirled around her. Voices hollow, faces blurred. She answered politely, but her chest was tight, her throat dry. Every cheer felt like an echo against a grave. She slipped away from the crowd, her footsteps carrying her into a quiet corner of the White House gardens, and there, waiting beneath the shade of an old oak tree, stood Rebecca Torres. For a moment, Mitchell froze. Even after months, seeing her alive still struck like lightning. Torres looked older now, her hair more silver than steel, her eyes carrying the shadows of 3 years spent in secrecy, in silence, in war fought in the dark. Any regrets? Torres asked softly, as if they were back on a quiet pier years ago, student and mentor again. Mitchell let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked down at the metal pinned to her chest, its polished shine mocking her. Plenty. Torres tilted her head, waiting. Mitchell's voice came low, strained. I regret that it took us this long, that Hartford and Virginia went down before the truth surfaced, that families buried empty coffins while traitors smiled in boardrooms, and I regret. Her voice broke for a moment. She swallowed hard. I regret that my crew had to see it, that they'll never look at the Navy the same way again. Torres' gaze softened, though her face stayed stern. You're right, they won't. Neither will you. Betrayal leaves a scar deeper than combat. But you carried them through it. That matters. Mitchell shook her head, bitterness lacing her words. I almost didn't. I almost believed Hayes. I almost doubted myself. Of course you did. Torres stepped closer, her voice a steady anchor. Doubt means you're human. Certainty belongs to tyrants and liars, leaders doubt, and then they decide anyway. That's the burden. Mitchell looked up, meeting her mentor's eyes. Why me, Rebecca? Out of everyone, why did you trust me to make that call? Torres smiled faintly, though the weight in her expression never lifted. Because I taught you what command really is, and because I knew when the moment came, you'd choose the harder path, not the safer one, the path with consequences. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things they didn't say, the lives lost, the trust broken, the scars hidden. Finally, Mitchell's voice came quiet. And what now? We exposed them, arrested them. The Navy's clean again? Torres' smile faded into something sharper. Clean? No, safer, yes, but conspiracies are like rot. Cut one branch, and another starts growing in the dark. There will be more. Always more. That's the curse of power. Mitchell felt the truth of it sink into her chest. A truth she didn't want, but could not deny. Vigilance was endless. Betrayal always possible. The president's voice echoed faintly from the Rose Garden. Another officer being called forward. Another medal awarded. Applause rose again. Mitchell closed her eyes. Torres placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved thousands, Sarah. Don't let the weight of what you couldn't save blind you to that. But Mitchell didn't answer, because in her heart, she knew numbers never healed. Grief, 1,000 saved, did not silence the faces of those lost. And she could still see them sailors she'd trained with, laughed with, written letters of condolence for, men and women who had trusted their command, only to be betrayed by it. When the applause finally faded and the ceremony ended, Mitchell walked back toward the White House with Torres beside her. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. History books would record her as a hero. But Mitchell knew the truth. Heroes didn't stand in gardens wearing medals. Heroes were buried at sea with no names remembered, no flags flying. Heroes were the ones who never came home. And as she stepped back into the light of celebration, Sarah Mitchell carried with her the weight of silence, the knowledge that medals tarnished. Applause faded, but the scars of betrayal stayed. Because sometimes victory doesn't feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like surviving when others didn't, and survival is its own burden. Why is silence sometimes harder than gunfire? The White House ceremony was behind her now. The applause, the cameras, the medal that weighed like a chain. Sarah Mitchell returned to the Vigilant 2 weeks later. Her ship docked quietly in San Diego. The moment she stepped aboard, the air changed. Sailors snapped to attention, their salutes crisp, their eyes locked forward. But beneath the discipline, she felt it, the hesitation, the weight of memory. They had seen her defy orders. They had watched her XO turn a gun on her. They had survived an enemy that wore the same patch on its shoulder as they did. She returned their salutes, but her chest tightened. This was no longer the same crew that had left port. In the wardroom that evening, she sat with them, faces young and old, tired and proud, but changed. The room was filled, yet the silence was sharp, heavy. Usually after deployment, laughter would spill across the tables, stories traded like currency. Now, forks scraped plates, voices kept low. Finally, Rodriguez broke it. "Captain, may I speak freely?" Mitchell looked at him. He was steady, his jaw tight, but his eyes carried something deeper. "Pain. Always," she said. His voice came low. "How do we trust again? We fought off an American ship. We followed you against orders, and we were right. But how do we know next time? How do we know the orders are clean? Or if the voice giving them isn't another traitor?" The room went silent. Dozens of eyes turned to her. The question hung there, heavier than any torpedo. Mitchell swallowed hard. She wanted to give them certainty. She wanted to tell them the Navy was whole again, the corruption purged, the nightmare over, but that would be a lie. She set her fork down, her voice steady. "You don't. None of us do. Trust isn't given by the system. Not anymore. It's built between us, on this deck, and the choices we make together." A pause. The words dug into the room. "You trusted me," she continued softly. "When I told you the constellation was wrong. When I told you Hayes was compromised. You didn't follow me because I had the rank. You followed me because you knew me. That's the only trust that matters now." For a moment, the silence lingered. Then Collins nodded slowly, his voice quiet but certain. "Aye, Captain. That's enough for me." Others followed, nodding, murmuring their assent. Not loudly, not with celebration, but with the quiet weight of people who had chosen. Mitchell let the moment pass, then rose from her seat. "We'll sail again soon, and when we do, we'll do what we always have: protect each other, protect our ship, protect our country. But never forget, sometimes the threat doesn't come from across the ocean. Sometimes it comes from behind. The same flag, that doesn't make us weaker, it makes us sharper." The crew absorbed her words. Their faces still solemn, but no longer fractured. The wound wasn't healed, but it had been acknowledged. Sometimes that was all that could be done. Later that night, Mitchell walked the deck alone. The Pacific stretched dark and endless before her, the lights of San Diego fading behind. The sea smelled of salt and memory, and she breathed it in like confession. She thought of Hayes, of his hollow eyes as he realized the truth, of his words, "I thought I was saving my country." He was in custody now, awaiting trial alongside Ricks and Bradley. His fate would be decided in courts and headlines. But his betrayal lingered like a ghost aboard her ship. Every time she passed the XO's quarters, she felt it. The absence, the shadow of what had stood there, loyal in appearance but rotted underneath. She leaned against the rail, staring out at the waves. Her reflection came back to her in fragments, distorted in the black water, fractured by ripples. Tara's words echoed in her mind. Command isn't about certainty. It's about carrying the doubt and choosing anyway. Mitchell hated that truth. Hated it because it was the only one she had left. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "Can't sleep either, Captain?" She turned. It was Williams, her sonar chief. His face was weathered, lines cut deep from years of listening to the ocean's secrets. "No," she admitted. "Too much noise." He stepped beside her, leaning on the rail. For a while, neither spoke. The sea filled the silence. Finally, he said, "You know what I keep hearing? Those subs surfacing, like thunder under the water, like justice breaking through. I'll carry that sound with me until I die." Mitchell gave a faint smile. "And Hayes?" William's jaw tightened. "Him too, but not the betrayal, the look. on his face when he realized the truth. That's the sound I'll remember, silence louder than thunder. Mitchell nodded. You still trust me, Chief? He turned, his gaze steady. I trusted you before the torpedoes. I trusted you when you turned starboard, and I'll trust you again. Betrayal doesn't erase loyalty, Captain. It makes it worth more. His words struck deeper than he knew. Because they weren't polished or ceremonial. They were raw, real, and real was all Mitchell had left. She stood there long after he left, the ocean whispering in its endless tongue. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Not clean, not whole, but enough. When she finally returned to her quarters, she sat at her desk, opened a blank page in her log, and wrote 4 words that came to her like a vow. We remain the Vigilant. She closed the book, the ship humming around her. Outside, the Pacific stretched endless and unknowable, and inside, Sarah Mitchell carried both the scars of betrayal and the fragile thread of trust that bound her crew together still. Because loyalty wasn't about never breaking. It was about choosing, again and again, to hold fast, even when the storm had already split the mast. And that, she realized, was the only way forward. Why did the horizon feel heavier this time? Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Vigilant once more, the Pacific stretching endless before her. The ship's engines hummed beneath her boots, the air alive with the smell of salt and steel. By all accounts, this was routine, just another patrol, just another watch. But nothing felt routine anymore, not after what they had lived through. Every time the radar pulsed, she felt her chest tighten. Every green blip carried with it the memory of a yacht that hadn't been what it seemed, of torpedoes racing toward her ship from an American destroyer. Every silence on the comms reminded her of Hayes' betrayal. The voice she had trusted most turned against her in a single heartbeat. Her crew carried it too. She saw it in their eyes, in the way they glanced at one another when new contacts appeared, in the quiet that lingered. After duty shifts, they were still sharp, still disciplined, still hers, but trust was now something fragile, like glass carried across a steel deck. Rodriguez's voice broke the silence. Captain, surface contact, bearing 315. Small vessel moving erratically. The bridge stiffened. Mitchell moved to the radar screen, her pulse quickening. A small blip. Could have been fishing traffic. Could have been lost, or something else. She took a long breath. The memory of that first yacht rushing back. Classification? Too small for cargo. Speed fluctuating. Possible distress. Mitchell's crew waited for her call. Their silence was louder than any alarm. Communications, she said at last. Hail them. Standard request. Collins adjusted his headset. His voice rang out firm. Unknown vessel at 315. This is United States Navy warship. Identify yourself. Static. Then a burst of garbled sound. Too distorted to make out. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Her crew's eyes flicked to her, each remembering the last time a distress call came cloaked in deception. Sonar? She asked. Williams pressed his headphones tight. Single screw. Engine struggling. No signs of auxiliary machinery. Just tired engines. He hesitated, then added, Doesn't feel like the yacht, Captain. Feels real. Mitchell weighed the words. Her instincts warred with her memory. Was it real this time? Or another mask, another trap designed to lure them close? The doubt pressed on her like a physical weight, and she hated it. Hated that betrayal had stolen from her the ability to see clearly. Captain? Hayes' voice whispered in her mind. Though Hayes was no longer here, we don't know. What? If we're being used? She pushed the memory aside, forcing her voice steady. Prepare a boarding team, mixed unit, Marines and sailors both. Her crew obeyed without hesitation. The small boat was lowered, men and women in helmets and vests. Descending into the sea, she watched through her binoculars as they closed the distance. Every second pulling her tighter inside. Minutes stretched. Then Martinez's voice came over comms. Steady but calm. Captain. Vessel secured, civilian fishing boat. Engines damaged, no hostile contacts, repeat no threat. The bridge exhaled. As one, shoulders eased, Mitchell lowered her binoculars slowly. Relief swept through her chest, followed by something sharper guilt. Because she had doubted them, because she had doubted herself, Rodriguez glanced her way, as if reading her thoughts. His voice was quiet. Captain, after what we've seen, doubt isn't weakness, it's survival. Mitchell met his eyes, and she realized he was right. The boarding team towed the fishing boat to safety, its crew grateful, frightened, but alive. It was, on the surface, a simple rescue. Yet for the Vigilant, it meant more. It meant they could still choose compassion without fear consuming them. It meant the Navy could still be what it was supposed to be. That night, Mitchell stood alone in her quarters. The logbook opened before her. She wrote. Slowly, the words scratching against the paper. Every decision feels heavier now. Every silence feels louder. But if we stop choosing, stop risking, then the betrayal wins, and I won't let that happen. She set the pen down, staring at the words. Outside, the sea whispered against the hull. A soft knock came at her door. Williams stepped in, hesitation in his stance. Captain, some of the crew wanted me to tell you something. Mitchell looked up, her brow furrowed. He shifted his weight, then said quietly, they wanted me to say they still trust you, even after Hayes, even after everything, especially after everything. Because when it mattered, you chose them. The words caught her off guard. Her chest ached. She looked down for a moment, then back up, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Williams nodded once and left. Mitchell sat in the silence, the medal from the White House lying untouched in its case on her desk. She stared at it for a long time, and then, almost without thinking, she closed the lid and slid it into a drawer. The medal wasn't the proof she needed. The trust of her crew that was. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The sound of the engines thrummed steady beneath her feet, the Vigilant carrying them all forward into an ocean that would never stop testing them. Betrayal had scarred them. Doubt had reshaped them, but they were still here. Still sailing, still vigilant, and Sarah Mitchell understood now, more than ever. Strength wasn't in the orders obeyed or the medals pinned. Strength was in standing in the storm, carrying the doubt, and still choosing to act, even when the horizon felt heavier than before. What does it mean to carry scars no one else can see? Months had passed since the day the submarine surfaced, since traitors in uniform were dragged from the shadows and exposed. The courts had convened. The trials had begun. The headlines had screamed. Admirals once untouchable now sat in handcuffs beneath fluorescent lights. Their names burned into history, not as heroes, but as betrayers. For the Vigilant, life went on. Patrols resumed, drills ran, engines turned. From the outside, it looked as if nothing had changed, but Sarah Mitchell knew better. Beneath the polished brass and painted steel, everything was different. She stood on the bridge one quiet morning, watching the horizon stretch wide and endless. The Pacific was calm, sunlight glinting off waves like shards of glass. To any outsider it was beautiful, but Mitchell no longer saw beauty without shadows. Every calm sea carried memory. Every empty sky reminded her of how fragile peace was. She thought of Hayes often. Once her XO, now confined in a military prison, awaiting sentencing, his betrayal cut deepest not because of his actions, but because of what he had believed. I thought I was saving my country. Those words haunted her, because if he could be convinced, if loyalty could be twisted so easily, then no one was beyond corruption. Not even herself. She carried the doubt like a scar, invisible but heavy. Captain. Rodriguez's voice broke her thoughts. He stood by the radar console, posture crisp, eyes steady. No contacts. Sir, seas are clear. Mitchell nodded, her gaze drifting back to the horizon. Clear seas, for now. but she knew better than to mistake quiet for safety. Later, in her quarters, she sat at her desk, the Navy Cross still tucked away in the drawer where she had left it. She hadn't worn it since the ceremony. Couldn't. The medal didn't feel like honor. It felt like a reminder. A reminder of 280 sailors who had gone to their deaths because men in power had sold their loyalty for money and influence. She opened her logbook, writing slowly, the words spilling like confession. The hardest part of command is not the enemy. Across the ocean, it's the doubt that lives within us. Doubt in our orders, doubt in our leaders, doubt in ourselves. But doubt isn't weakness. Doubt is what keeps us human. What matters is what we do in spite of it. She paused, her pen hovering, her throat tight. Hayes betrayed us, but even he believed he was serving something greater. That is the danger, that betrayal can wear the mask of loyalty. The only defense we have is each other. Trust built not from orders, not from rank, but from knowing who stands beside you when the storm comes. She closed the book, exhaling slowly. That evening, she walked the deck as the sun sank low, painting the sea in fire and gold. Her crew moved about their duties, steady, silent, resolute. She passed them with a nod. Each nod returned. No cheers, no applause, just quiet recognition. And somehow, that felt truer than any ceremony in Washington. She stopped by the rail, the wind tugging at her hair, the horizon burning orange ahead. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a small breath of peace, because the Vigilant still sailed. Her crew still stood, and though the scars would never fade, they were still here, still choosing, still fighting for one another. She remembered Tora's words that day, words that had never left her. Command isn't about having all the answers. It's about making the right decisions when you don't have enough information and living with the consequences. Sarah Mitchell understood now, more than ever, what that meant. Leadership wasn't glory. It wasn't medals. It wasn't the speeches or the ceremonies. It was the weight of silence, the choices made in shadows, the trust carried between shipmates when everything else broke. She looked out at the sea one last time, her voice barely a whisper carried away on the wind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The Vigilant sailed on, engine steady, cutting through the endless horizon, and Sarah Mitchell stood at her postguard, burdened but unbroken, because vigilance was not just the name of her ship. It was the price of freedom.